One quiet night in October 2023, a 13-year-old boy made a shocking 911 call that left the Hialeah, Florida, community stunned. His voice was shaky and full of fear as he admitted to something terrible that had just happened in his home, a crime that no one could have expected. With his newborn sister asleep in the next room and his stepfather far away, the boy's confession started an investigation that uncovered dark and surprising details about what took place that night. But why did this young boy do such a terrible thing? And could there be more to the story? The truth is much more complicated than it seems. Irina Garcia, born around 1984, was of Cuban descent and moved to Miami, Florida, with her mother. While not much is known about her early life, she later married Jose Rosa, a man serving in the military, and they welcomed their first child, Derek Rosa, on August 26, 2010. Although Irina and Jose eventually divorced, they maintained a friendly co-parenting relationship. Derek spent weekdays with his mother and stayed with his father every other weekend. He also had a strong bond with his maternal grandmother. Derek grew up as a respectful and well-behaved child, known for his academic achievements and strong character. He was a student at Mater Academy, excelling in his studies, and had dreams of becoming an engineer in the U.S. military. As time passed, Irina found love again with Frank Ramos, a fellow Cuban who worked as a long-distance truck driver. The couple moved into an apartment in Hialeah, Florida. In 2023, Irina became pregnant with her second child. A few days before giving birth, the family captured their joy in a photo shoot, celebrating the upcoming arrival of their daughter, Ashley, born in late September of that year. By all accounts, Irina was a warm and kind person, creating a harmonious and loving home. However, on October 12, 2023, just days after Derek's 13th birthday, their lives were shattered. That day, Derek made a shocking 911 call confessing that he had killed his mother with a knife. His voice was filled with fear and hesitation during the 17-minute call as he tried to explain to the dispatcher what had happened. He revealed that he was home alone with his mother and his 14-day-old sister who was asleep in her crib. Frank, his stepfather, was away on a trip, testing a truck outside the city. During the call, Derek mentioned that his stepfather had 2 firearms, one of which was in the apartment. After committing the crime, Derek had briefly considered using one of the guns to harm himself, but ultimately decided against it. He also revealed that he had spoken to a friend about the incident, a detail that left authorities stunned and raised more questions. When asked by the dispatcher why he had attacked his mother, Derek provided an answer that was not publicly disclosed. Throughout the call, the dispatcher worked to keep him calm and occupied, while officers traced his location and rushed to the scene. As police approached the home, the tension increased, and the dispatcher urged Derek to keep his hands empty and move away from any weapons. When officers arrived, Derek peacefully surrendered and was taken into custody while neighbors recorded the scene. Inside the home, police found a gruesome sight: Irina's body, lying on the bed covered in blood. Beside her, the newborn baby slept peacefully, unharmed. The infant was later placed in the care of her maternal grandmother. That same night, Derek was interrogated by the Hialeah police. Despite the gravity of his actions, he remained calm and composed during the questioning. He confessed that after going to bed around 10 p.m., he had woken up just after 11:30 p.m., gone to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and entered his mother's room. While Irina slept next to her baby, Derek attacked her.
What type of knife was it, do you know?
It was just a big size kitchen knife.
That big?
Yeah.
What did you do with the guns?
I grabbed the gun.
Okay.
I pulled back to slide, but I didn't want to shoot myself.
Okay.
I intended to shoot myself before, but I couldn't.
Why did you kill your mother? Do you know?
If I have to say it now,
Yeah, get it off your chest. Absolutely.
I can only for a lawyer.
During the interview, Derek detailed the bloodstains on his shirt and hands, explaining they were from the attack. He even demonstrated the size of the knife he used, describing how he first targeted her neck, believing it was a vulnerable spot. During Derek's interrogation, as seen in the video footage, he appeared calm while answering detectives' questions. He admitted that before committing the crime, he had insulted his mother in Spanish. The first stab had startled her, and she only managed to scream once before falling silent. However, Derek's demeanor changed significantly when a detective asked about his reasons for killing his mother. He requested to use the bathroom and then remained quiet for a few moments. He finally questioned whether he needed to answer that question at that time and asked for a lawyer, bringing the interrogation to a close. The forensic examination of Irina revealed a total of 46 wounds, many inflicted on her face. Additionally, the investigation of Derek's phone uncovered disturbing images that horrified those who saw them. Not only had Derek contacted a friend to tell him about the crime, but he had also sent 3 photographs, 2 of his deceased mother and 1 of himself posing for a chilling selfie with blood on his hands. The friend, whom Derek mentioned both in his 911 call and later to detectives, was someone he had met through online gaming when he was 10 years old. They had never met in person and communicated mostly on weekends. Derek didn't even know his real name, referring to him only by the alias Sweden, which was saved in his phone. The search history on Derek's phone revealed unsettling queries before the crime, such as how to kill someone with a knife, the most effective method to do it, and where to target the body for the quickest result. Authorities noted that Derek had specifically researched the jugular vein. As the sole suspect in his mother's murder, Derek was taken into custody, while investigators confirmed that his stepfather, Frank, had been out of state at the time of the incident, working in Georgia. The community was left in shock, struggling to comprehend how a promising young boy could become entangled in such a tragic event. Neighbors and friends expressed disbelief, remembering Derek as a polite and dedicated student. His family requested privacy as they mourned the loss of Irina. A Hialeah police spokesperson revealed that Derek had been a model student, with no previous issues at home or school. He had no known history of mental health problems that could have explained his actions. On October 27, 2023, the authorities announced that Derek would face a charge of first-degree murder and would be tried as an adult. His request for house arrest under the supervision of his father and grandmother was denied, and he was transferred to the Metro West Detention Center in Doral. Due to his age, he was kept isolated from the general prison population and monitored 24/7, as he was considered a danger to himself. Despite the overwhelming evidence, some rallied in Derek's defense, including his family. His father described him as a respectful student and was baffled by what could have driven his son to such an act. Having served in the military for 22 years, he believed he had instilled strong values in his child. Derek's maternal grandmother referred to him as the best boy in the world, urging people not to misunderstand the situation, as no one knew him better than she did. A campaign titled Save Derek Rosa was launched online, garnering over 23,000 signatures in support of the teenager. The petition raised doubts about Derek's involvement, suggesting that his search history might have been manipulated or that someone else could have used his device. There was also suspicion that Derek, whose first language was English, might not have written the Spanish search terms found on his phone. Some claimed there was a second voice heard during Derek's 911 call and demanded further investigation into other family members, particularly Frank. Although Frank was never a suspect, many speculated about his involvement. Some accused him of manipulating Derek, and rumors about Frank's personal life sparked public interest. Speculation arose that Frank had a second family in his home country, with photos surfacing online showing him with another woman and 2 girls. However, no concrete evidence linked him to a hidden past. After the crime, Frank opposed the defense's request to search the apartment, claiming that Derek's father and other relatives had already removed several items. The prosecution supported Frank's decision, though this refusal added to public suspicion. Frank's lack of public statements further fueled conspiracy theories, with many wondering about his whereabouts following the incident. On December 14th, the trial began. Derek's grandmother, father, and other relatives attended, and several testimonies were given in defense of the teenager. The defense lawyers argued for Derek's transfer to a juvenile detention center, stating that his rights were being violated by keeping him in an adult facility, given that he was a minor. Prosecutors, on the other hand, argued that Derek's current situation ensured he received an education while incarcerated. Testifying in his favor were a counselor and 2 teachers who provided him with personalized lessons to help him continue his high school education. Although the teenager spent around 20 hours a day confined in his cell, he had limited interactions. He met with his math teacher 3 times a week and had language classes for another 3 hours each week. The prison housed 34 other minors, but Derek, being the youngest at 13, had restricted interactions, limited to brief periods of playing soccer and basketball with a single other inmate. Derek's math instructor testified that the boy responded to lessons just like any other student. Meanwhile, his language teacher noted that Derek often expressed confusion during lessons, leading her to suspect he had learning difficulties. However, she also emphasized that Derek was polite and a diligent student. Derek's attorneys argued that he had lost 6 pounds during his first few months in detention. They called a forensic psychologist to testify, although the psychologist had not personally evaluated Derek. The specialist attributed Derek's weight loss to depression caused by isolation and testified that Derek was likely experiencing severe self-harm tendencies, which were not visibly apparent. The psychologist also suggested that Derek could be on the autism spectrum and recommended that he be treated as if he had autism until proven otherwise. The Correctional Health Services psychologist diagnosed Derek with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and confirmed that he had tendencies towards self-harm. It was notable that this was the first mention of Derek potentially being on the autism spectrum. Up until that point, he had not been diagnosed with any such condition, and his school records from the past 8 years had shown no signs of any deficiencies. Investigators who interacted with Derek in the hours following the crime also testified during this hearing, and the disturbing video of his confession was shown to the court. This was one of the few moments when Derek lowered his head and appeared to cry. Additionally, the state attorney's office released 2 new security videos as evidence. In the first video, Derek is seen opening the door to the apartment where his mother Irina is seated, holding the newborn baby. According to some sources, there was an argument between them. The second video shows Derek standing by his mother's bed as she slept, moments before her life was taken. The court also viewed photographs of the crime scene, including the weapon used. With these grim details, prosecutors aimed to prevent the judge from authorizing Derek's transfer to a juvenile detention center, insisting that he posed a danger to the community. After several days of testimony, the judge expressed concern over the relatively small amount of time Derek was allowed outside his cell but found no clear violation of his constitutional rights. As a result, the defense's request for a transfer to a juvenile facility was denied, and the judge ordered Derek to remain in the adult detention center. In an emotional hearing on Thursday, February 15th, defense attorneys presented 26 letters written by family members, all emphasizing that Derek was a kind, loving child and that the crime did not reflect his true character. The courtroom was filled with tension and hope as the letters were read aloud, highlighting the deep emotional impact of the situation on Derek's family and supporters. Derek's grandmother, father, and other family members attended the hearing, their faces filled with concern and love. Supporters from different parts of the United States had also traveled to be there, wearing T-shirts emblazoned with "Save Derek." Their presence was a powerful display of unwavering support for the young boy. Many in attendance echoed the sentiment that a child is innocent until proven guilty, and they firmly believed Derek Rosa could not have committed such a heinous act. His maternal grandmother emphasized that Derek was not an adult, but still a child who needed guidance. His biological father pleaded for leniency and a second chance to help Derek grow and learn from his mistakes. Both underscored the strong family support surrounding him. The letters submitted on Derek's behalf mostly asked the court not to treat him as an adult in the legal process. Derek's defense team argued that they were not prepared for trial because the prosecution had not provided all the necessary evidence. They pointed out key missing elements such as witness reports, footage from the baby monitor, clothing, and other personal items. Derek's attorney requested a court order forcing the prosecution to hand over the missing evidence or to exclude it from the case if it wasn't produced by a specific deadline. However, the prosecution had also been unable to access data from Derek's computer, tablets, and gaming consoles. The judge overseeing the case confirmed that there were 750 photos and multiple witness statements involved and ordered the prosecution to submit all unedited information. A new hearing date was set, but the judge maintained his decision to try Derek as an adult. Despite the judge's expressed urgency to expedite the trial, citing concerns about Derek's conditions in detention, the case became tangled in a series of hearings and delays. Throughout the proceedings, the defense petitioned for Derek to be declared indigent, arguing that the family lacked the financial resources to afford private attorneys. They requested that the state cover the costs for case preparation, including mental health experts, forensic analysis, and witness testimonies. At the most recent hearing, held on September 21, 2024, Derek appeared virtually and remained silent. His family broke down in tears upon seeing him on the screen, overwhelmed with emotion and pain. Concerned about the lengthy periods Derek spent in isolation, his lawyers once again petitioned to transfer him from the adult jail to a juvenile detention center. According to news reports, March records indicated that Derek had only been out of his cell for a total of 119 hours, with just 5 hours devoted to his education. Despite these revelations, the judge denied the request once again. New developments emerged when the prosecution identified Derek's mysterious online friend from the night of the crime. Through electronic device analysis, detectives traced the phone's owner and conducted an interrogation. Derek's trial is scheduled for December 2, 2024, with at least 28 witnesses expected to testify. The prosecution plans to present video testimony from Sweden, Derek's online friend. Meanwhile, the defense has reportedly obtained text messages between the Hialeah police detectives and Derek's stepfather, which could shed light on their relationship and whether any influence or manipulation took place before the crime. This ongoing investigation focuses on official information, witness statements, and family accounts. As the case is still unresolved, we refrain from making any judgments regarding Derek's innocence or guilt. Thanks for tuning in. The quiet Christchurch suburb was shaken on the night of May 3, 2009. Inside a small, one-story house, a tragic scene was unfolding. Philip Nisbet, a loving father and truck driver, was found lying lifeless on his bed, his eyes open but unseeing. His wife, Helen Milner, stood nearby, holding a phone and crying as she told the police that her husband had taken his own life. The initial shock of Phil's sudden death deeply affected their family and friends, but as they grieved, doubts and suspicions started to arise. Helen Milner was born around 1964 in New Zealand to Anne Milner. Anne often shared how challenging it was to raise Helen, who was a difficult child from a young age. By the age of 10, Helen had already begun causing serious trouble, a pattern that continued throughout her life. Anne kept a list documenting Helen's misdeeds, which included serious incidents. Helen attended high school in Christchurch, the largest city on New Zealand's South Island, known for its English heritage. Despite being in a reputable school, Helen engaged in theft from her classmates and withdrew substantial sums of money from her mother's bank account. Although her mother decided against pressing charges and her peers did not report her to the authorities, the school eventually expelled her. Concerned about her future, her mother enrolled her in Ritchie Secretarial College. After graduating, Helen worked as a typist but was dismissed after presenting a falsified letter from the Ministry of Health, which supposedly allowed smoking in the staff room. She then took a job as a cashier at United Building Society, a New Zealand construction society, but was fired for stealing money. Once again, her mother covered the stolen amount and spent thousands to keep her out of court and prison. Despite these efforts, Helen continued on a troubled path. She had moved to Wellington with a fiancé, but the relationship ended badly, leaving her in debt and returning to Christchurch. Money remained an issue. Helen often took advantage of her family, stealing from her disabled aunt and her father's wallet. In her early 20s, Helen met Mark Robert Kearns and they married around 1987, having 2 sons, Greg and Adam. Their marriage ended in a bitter divorce in the mid-1990s, marked by a fierce custody battle. According to Mark, Helen was manipulative and motivated by money or personal gain, showing no empathy. She allegedly lied in family court to gain custody and told the children that their father had moved to Australia and did not want to see them. Despite spending over $20,000 on lawyers, Mark struggled to maintain contact with his children until they were old enough to visit him independently, by which time their relationship was severely strained. Details of Helen's life after the divorce are unclear until 2005 when she married Philip Nisbet. Phil was born on March 20th, 1962. He was the eldest of 4 siblings. As the eldest, Phil was always protective and caring towards his siblings, especially his youngest sister. At some point, the Nisbets moved to Australia, but Phil chose to stay in New Zealand. He worked as a truck driver, a demanding but reasonably well-paid job. He was married to a woman named Vicky, with whom he had his eldest son, Zach. After their separation, he formed a relationship with Karen, which produced his younger son, Ben. This relationship also ended, leaving Phil single again as he entered his 40s. The specifics of how Phil and Helen met remain unclear, but it is evident that both had experienced failed marriages and had children from previous relationships. Their happiness together was well documented in family photos shared on social media, showing them smiling and evidently in love. They got married in 2005. Initially, everything seemed perfect, and their families were pleased to see them rebuilding their lives. However, not everything was flawless, and like any couple, they had their difficulties. Even Helen's family blamed her for generating conflicts, as Phil avoided confrontations. Helen and her sister-in-law, Lee Ann, had a falling out in 2006, leading to a permanent rift. There are 2 versions of the story behind their disagreement. One version suggests that Lee Ann's teenage son, Lance, had stayed with Phil and Helen, and after an incident that upset Helen, she called her sister-in-law to complain, resulting in an argument. The other version claims that Lance reported to his mother about a nefarious plan that his Uncle Phil was allegedly plotting under Helen's influence to harm his ex-partner Karen. Lee Ann confronted Phil about the absurd plan and took her son out of Phil's house. Despite this, Lee Ann continued to love her brother but regretted the distance that grew between them. Although things seemed fine, or at least Phil thought so, Helen had grown tired of the relationship. She spoke ill of him behind his back and complained about not being free. Sometimes she openly fantasized in front of her co-workers about becoming a widow. However, she never mentioned divorce. On April 15, 2009, Phil fainted at work and was taken to the hospital. Doctors were unsure of the cause but suspected an allergic reaction to a spider or insect bite during a recent visit to Australia for his birthday. His condition improved and he was sent home, but that night he fell ill again. Helen informed her younger son that she would take Phil back to the hospital. In the days that followed, Adam spoke to Phil about something odd he had noticed the night Phil's condition worsened. He told Phil that his mother had been holding some empty capsules and tried to hide them from view. Despite being Helen's son, Adam warned his stepfather to be cautious, suggesting that his mother might poison him. Phil, trusting and unwilling to believe such a thing, reassured Adam that he had nothing to worry about and must have been mistaken. This incident was the final straw for Adam, who moved out the next day, unwilling to remain in a toxic environment. For about 3 weeks, life returned to normal, with everyone going about their routines without health issues. On May 3, 2009, Phil, a loving father, texted his younger son Ben before bed, informing him that he had washed his hoodie and would bring it to him the next day. However, Phil did not wake up that morning. On May 4, 2009, Helen called the police, reporting that her husband Phil was dead in their home. The police responded quickly as it was a slow day with an available patrol. Helen, in tears, opened the door and led the officers to the master bedroom, where they found Phil's body lying diagonally on the bed, eyes open and not breathing. The officers noticed 2 empty packets of pills and a half-empty glass of water on the nightstand. Helen's crying intensified, but something about her made the officers keep their distance. They called their superiors to report the scene and notify Phil's family. With the phone in her hand, Helen reported that her husband had taken his own life and that she had evidence to prove it. The police took the phone and saw a message on the screen, seemingly sent by Phil. The message expressed Phil's sorrow, stating he couldn't go on, that he loved her very much, and asked her to take care of herself and tell Ben that he loved him. The message was dated May 3rd and sent at 10:30 p.m. The lead officer on the scene was notified of everything that transpired during their investigation. Meanwhile, Phil's body was taken to the morgue in hopes that the autopsy would shed light on the situation. Leigh Ann described the moment she received the call from her father, informing her that Phil had ended his life, as terrible. Despite not speaking to her brother much over the past 2 years due to her argument with Helen, she never imagined Phil would make such a drastic decision. Days later, when the preliminary autopsy report was released, it was revealed that Phil's body contained high levels of an anti-allergic drug that paradoxically caused him a severe allergic reaction. At that moment, Leigh Ann felt she had to accept that her brother had decided to end it all, but something in her spirit rebelled against this notion. From then on, significant events unfolded, but the police seemed fixated on the idea that Phil's death was self-inflicted, causing delays in the investigation. Then, something almost unheard of in criminal cases occurred. The perpetrator's own family accused her. On May 13th, the couple's relatives went to the police station. They expressed their suspicions that Helen had tried to kill her husband 3 weeks before the fatal outcome. However, this lead was not immediately pursued. Another notable event was that during May, Helen began exchanging text messages with an ex-boyfriend named Barry. Surprisingly, Barry moved into the home Helen and her recently deceased husband had shared just a few weeks later. By this time, Leigh Ann had re-established contact with Helen, as Phil's death necessitated conversations and reconciliation. In one of their talks, Helen mentioned a farewell letter that Phil had left, which she found when she opened the safe. She read the letter and promised to show it to Leigh Ann when they met in person. A little over a month after her brother's death, Leigh Ann flew from Australia to New Zealand for 2 reasons. One was to celebrate her son's 21st birthday, and the other was to discreetly investigate Phil's death. Helen offered her a place to stay, and she accepted. The night of her arrival, Helen greeted her with a vodka glass in one hand and the supposed farewell note in the other, typed on office paper and signed with Phil scribbled at the bottom. Leigh Ann immediately thought it didn't look like her brother's signature but remained silent, focusing on the letter's content. Phil claimed he had discovered that Ben was not his biological son and could not face him again. Additionally, Helen mentioned finding a small black book Phil supposedly kept, detailing affairs with other women and a guide on becoming a gigolo. Though angered by the negative image Helen was trying to paint of her brother, Leigh Ann had to pretend not to arouse suspicion. She said she disapproved of Phil's decision to take his own life and would go to bed to be in good condition for the next day when the family would gather at a restaurant to celebrate Lance's 21st birthday. That day when Helen returned from work, she was furious, carrying the mail in her hand. Karen, Ben's mother, had written to request Ben's belongings from the house and some money Phil had left for his younger son. Filled with rage, Helen declared she would put Karen in her place, claiming Ben wasn't Phil's son and announcing that they would not be attending Lance's birthday celebration. Although Lee Ann disagreed with Helen's behavior, she chose to remain silent, not wanting to provoke her. She needed to stay close and observe everything she could, as she continued to suspect foul play in her brother's death. That evening, Barry, Helen's new boyfriend, dropped off the two women at the restaurant where they would celebrate Lance's birthday. Upon arriving, they met Zach, Phil's eldest son, who was with Vicky, his mother, and her partner. Helen was extremely courteous to them, even inviting Zach to her house the following weekend to sort through his father's belongings and take what he wanted. Lee Ann later remarked that she could hardly focus on Lance's celebration with everything happening before her eyes. She couldn't understand why Ben was treated so poorly while Zach was offered his father's possessions. It also struck her as odd that Ben was mentioned in Phil's last messages, but Zach was not. She suspected that Phil had not taken his own life and that Helen had written the notes to sow discord between the brothers, but she couldn't prove it. Before returning to Australia, Lee Ann went to the police and provided all this information. She found it suspicious that Helen was already living with her new boyfriend in the house she had shared with Phil. Following the accusations from Helen's own family and Lee Ann's statements, the police requested Helen to provide the supposed farewell note from her husband. She submitted it on July 6, 2009, but notably, Phil's scrawled signature was missing. Meanwhile, Helen's relationship with Barry was progressing rapidly. On July 12, 2009, he gifted her a gold ring with a diamond worth over $2,000. Helen wore it proudly on her ring finger but insisted it was not an engagement ring, as Barry had not proposed when he gave it to her. Throughout 2009, Helen continued her deceitful ways. Between January and September, she had been stealing from her employer, although no one knew at the time. At the beginning of 2010, amid multiple requests from Phil's family to clarify the circumstances of his death, the police summoned Helen for another statement. On January 30th, she made her second statement, and by then, her depiction of an ideal marriage from her first interview had changed significantly. She told the detective that she never claimed her husband was a good man. When asked about the note explaining his decision, she stated that the police had found it in his briefcase and that the handwritten signature resembled Phil's writing. The investigator reminded her that the letter she submitted to the station had no signature. Helen quickly responded that she had kept a copy and hadn't looked at it for so long that she mistakenly believed it was signed. Helen also expressed that Phil's family had turned against her, claiming it was unfair. Known for her vengeful nature, in March 2010, she bought a mobile phone and sent herself threatening messages, pretending they were from her son Adam. This was her way of retaliating after learning he had backed his grandmother when alerting the police about how dangerous Helen could be. She accused Adam of sending death threats to his ex-girlfriend, suggesting he had violated a restraining order and claimed he was extremely aggressive, making her fear for her safety. Due to these serious allegations from his mother, Adam was detained for over 15 days until it was revealed that everything was a fabrication of Helen's twisted mind. Helen's luck seemed to turn in late 2010. In October, she was sentenced to 5 months of house arrest after being found guilty of stealing from her employer between January and September 2009. Concurrently, Lee Ann's persistence bore fruit, leading to a forensic investigation into Phil's death starting in November 2010. Lee Ann had requested permission to review some evidence for the court case, and it was granted. Lee Ann brought a folder of documents with Phil's signature for comparison with the farewell letter. The judge showed her and her brother the letter. Lee Ann practically snatched it from the judge's hand upon seeing it lacked a signature, displaying her anger and disappointment at what she saw as another of Helen's attempts to evade responsibility. The subsequent court investigation highlighted the police's failings in investigating Phil's death, Helen's history of law violations, and mounting evidence that Phil had not taken his own life but was a victim of foul play. On the stand, Helen described her husband as very nervous and easily agitated, recounting their trip to Australia in March 2009 for Phil's birthday. During that trip, he had been bitten by an insect, taken a low dose of Phenergan, and remained unconscious for at least 6 hours, discovering his severe allergy to the medication. Helen added that the day before his death, they had a pleasant time shopping, having lunch and discussing future projects for the house. They had dinner, watched TV, and Phil showered and went to bed around 9:30 p.m. According to Helen, she joined him an hour later, kissed him goodnight, and went to sleep. The investigation in court lasted 6 months, with various pieces of evidence presented and thoroughly analyzed. On May 12, 2011, the judge presented her conclusions, stating there was insufficient evidence to prove Phil intended to take his own life. This conclusion paved the way for a homicide investigation. The investigators took an immediate interest in the case and launched a murder inquiry that lasted several months. On October 27, 2011, Helen was arrested and charged with murder and attempted murder. In the meantime, Helen continued facing legal repercussions for her other actions. In August 2012, she was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison for sending herself insulting text messages, pretending they were from her son. In March 2010, she was denied parole. The murder trial began on December 12, 2013. The Crown's prosecution spent 2 weeks presenting evidence from over 70 witnesses, asserting that Helen attempted to kill her husband twice, succeeding on the second attempt, using doses of the anti-allergy and sedative drug Phenergan. The motive was believed to be financial, as Helen intended to claim Phil's $250,000 life insurance policy. The financial advisor who sold the policy to the couple in 2008 testified that Phil was present when the policy was purchased, but he suspected Helen filled out the entire form on her husband's behalf. It was also revealed that the insurance policy had a 13-month exclusion clause for voluntary death, which expired in March 2009, just before Helen's alleged attempts on Phil's life. The Crown recounted Helen's purchase of the medication to which Phil was allergic, using false names and addresses. They suggested she mixed the drug into Phil's food and, after he was sedated, suffocated him. She then manipulated the scene, sending the fake farewell text and writing the typed note. A DNA test confirmed that the claim about Ben not being Phil's biological son was false. Colleagues of Helen testified that she frequently talked about poisons and her desire to suffocate her husband. A pivotal moment in the trial was Adam's testimony. He recalled visiting the police station with his grandmother on May 13, 2009, after Helen had expressed her desire to kill Phil and even suggested hiring a hitman. When Adam asked why she didn't divorce Phil instead, Helen responded that she didn't want to lose half of the house. Adam recounted seeing his mother in the kitchen on April 15, 2009, with 2 transparent capsules filled with a pale blue powder, which she nervously hid when he noticed. She claimed Phil had a headache. That night, Helen took Phil to the hospital, and the next day, Adam warned his stepfather about what he had seen, but Phil dismissed his concerns. The first officer on the scene, noted that Helen's prolonged emotional display seemed unnatural. He and his colleague found it suspicious that the farewell text was discovered precisely when they were at the house. Helen's explanation that she stayed in bed with Phil until 2 a.m., then moved to the sofa after taking insulin, was also dubious, as Phil's body was positioned in a way that made it unlikely she had been beside him. Additionally, the farewell text was sent at 10:30 p.m., contradicting her timeline. In court, it was revealed that Helen's mother had written a letter requesting Helen's removal from her will and had accompanied Adam to the police to report Phil's suspected murder. Anne's letter stated that she finally faced the truth about her daughter, describing Helen as either mentally ill or simply evil. The defense maintained that Phil had taken his own life and argued that the Crown's case was based on orchestrated and arbitrary evidence. The Crown presented a circumstantial but solid case, while the defense lawyer warned against convicting Helen based on what he considered subjective evidence. The police admitted initial investigative failings, stating the case should have been treated as a homicide from the start. A jury of 7 men and 5 women deliberated for half a day before rejecting the defense's claim that Phil had taken his own life. They found Helen guilty of murder, but not guilty of attempted murder. Helen, then 50, reacted calmly as the jury delivered their verdict. In February 2014, the sentencing hearing for Helen took place at the Christchurch High Court. The judge addressed Helen directly, stating that she committed the crime purely for financial gain, and because she wanted to rid herself of a husband she no longer desired in her life. He added that her actions were even more reprehensible because Phil was an exceptionally kind man who had given her no reason to take his life. The judge agreed with the Crown's assertion that Helen's actions were calculated and cold, describing them as a meticulously planned and executed scheme with cruel disregard for Phil's family and friends. Ultimately, Helen was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 17 years before being eligible for parole, for causing Phil's death in 2009 to claim a $250,000 life insurance payout. One of the consequences of the trial was the tarnishing of the police's reputation for initially adhering to the idea of a self-inflicted fatal injury despite indicators of foul play. The media highlighted this issue, which the public deemed crucial. Reports revealed an internal document exposing fundamental flaws in the initial investigation. After the sentencing, Mark Kearns, Helen's first husband, broke his silence, stating that Helen nearly destroyed his relationship with their children. He said he was trying to rebuild his bond with Greg, 25, and Adam, 23, understanding the need to move past the past. Adam, who had filed a civil lawsuit against his mother for falsely accusing him of harassment, won the case in 2014. He argued that Helen's actions caused him pain, distress, humiliation, and financial loss due to his unjust 15-day imprisonment. Helen was ordered to pay Adam Kearns $55,000. However, Helen's impact on Adam's life led to further legal troubles. He faced charges for cannabis sale and illegal possession of a shotgun and appeared in the media for assaulting Justin Marshall, a former New Zealand Super Rugby champion from the early 2000s. Leanne's persistence ensured that Phil's murder did not go unpunished. After the intense legal battle, she, a single mother of 4 living in Australia, wrote a book about the case, published in 2016. By then, she had also started studying criminology and justice at the University of the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, hoping to work in the criminal justice system to improve the arduous and stressful path for other victims. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. The night of January 16, 1984 seemed like any other for the Bennett family in Aurora, Colorado. They had just celebrated their daughter Melissa's upcoming 8th birthday with family and friends. The house was full of laughter and warmth. As the evening ended, Bruce and Deborah Bennett put their daughters, Melissa and 3-year-old Vanessa, to bed, not knowing that their peaceful home was about to be shattered by a terrible act of violence. Bruce and Deborah Bennett married in the 1970s, brimming with hopes and dreams for their future together. Nearing their 20s, the young couple looked forward to building a life side by side. Bruce, born on April 22, 1956, in Denver, Colorado, had an unremarkable childhood as suggested by later accounts, with 2 brothers named Richard and Daniel. Deborah was the eldest of 4 siblings, children of war veteran Ernest Large and his wife, Rosina Martinez. Tragically, Deborah lost her mother at a young age, forcing her to take on the responsibility of caring for her younger siblings alongside her father. The family eventually relocated to Colorado, where Larry, one of Deborah's brothers, met Bruce, leading to a friendship that ultimately brought Bruce and Deborah together. The pair soon fell in love and decided to start a family. To support his new family, Bruce enlisted in the Navy, serving as a sonar analyst stationed at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. This job allowed him to work with advanced technology, providing a stable income. During his service, their first daughter, Melissa Bennett, was born in January 1976. Their second daughter, Vanessa, arrived in 1981. After completing his military service, Bruce had succeeded in securing a better financial standing for his family. They settled in Aurora, Colorado, and in 1983 they used their savings and a loan to purchase their first home. Bruce and Deborah joined the family's furniture distribution business, while Bruce also pursued studies to become an air traffic controller. The Bennett family led a quiet life, enjoying their time with their 2 young daughters. However, their peaceful existence was shattered in early 1984. On Sunday, January 15, 1984, the Bennetts hosted a family gathering to celebrate Melissa's upcoming 8th birthday. Deborah had planned a party at school for her daughter, but the family also gathered at the Bennett home for a pre-birthday celebration. The day was filled with laughter, conversation, and a delicious cake. As the evening wound down, Melissa's grandparents and uncles left for their homes. One of the uncles noticed the garage door was open and reminded Bruce to close it, unaware it would be the last time he would see Bruce alive. The next morning, on January 16, 1984, Bruce's mother, Constance Bennett, known as Connie, received a call from the family furniture store. Bruce and Deborah had not shown up for work, and no one was answering the phone at their house. Concerned, Connie decided to check on them. When she arrived at the Bennett home, the garage door was still open. Entering the house, she was met with a horrifying sight. Bruce lay at the foot of the stairs in a pool of blood with severe head trauma and a deep cut across his throat. Shocked and terrified, Connie ran to a neighbor for help. They called 911 and soon, police and medical personnel were on the scene. Inside the house, police discovered Deborah's body in the master bedroom, her head brutally beaten. In the children's room, they found Melissa, also beaten and stabbed, her face covered with a blanket and showing signs of sexual assault. Miraculously, little Vanessa, despite her severe injuries, was still alive. Emergency responders rushed her to the hospital, where her life hung by a thread. With Vanessa on the way to the hospital and the bodies of her family members removed, investigators began meticulously examining the Bennett home for clues. They found Deborah's purse outside in the snow, rifled through, likely by the attackers. Nearby, a butcher knife belonging to the Bennetts was discovered, believed to be one of the weapons used in the attacks. While the murder weapon used for the fatal blows was never found, investigators suspected it might have been a hammer, based on the injuries and a blood-stained outline found on a carpet. They collected fingerprints and other samples from various surfaces, hoping to find traces that would lead them to the perpetrator. They also noted blood-stained boot prints that the family did not recognize. Family members and close friends who had attended Melissa's birthday party that Sunday were also asked to provide DNA samples. Authorities took these measures, hoping that in the future they could be used for genetic studies, which were in their early stages at that time. Specialists carefully preserved the victim's clothing and, upon thorough examination, collected parts of the carpet beneath Melissa's body, as well as a bedspread and other items. Meanwhile, a team of healthcare professionals fought to keep Vanessa alive. The 3-year-old needed 3 units of blood and several units of fluids for the treatment of her numerous injuries. The doctor's report to the family was devastating. Vanessa had a shattered jaw, severe head injuries and broken arms, hips, and legs. She had also been sexually assaulted. As days passed, investigators realized that the Bennett family attack was not an isolated incident. Less than 2 weeks before the brutal assault on the Bennetts, several similar attacks had occurred in Colorado. One notable case involved the young couple James and Kimberly, who lived in the Aurora area. On the night of January 4, 1984, James and Kimberly were spending a quiet evening at home. Kimberly was in the bedroom, and James was recording music tapes for a friend. Suddenly, Kimberly was struck on the head in the dark. She managed to see the silhouette of a man who fled when she began to scream for her husband. James ran to the bedroom and was hit on the head by the hammer-wielding attacker. Despite his injury, James chased the assailant, who ultimately escaped. Kimberly, despite her severe head injury, called 911. Emergency services arrived and transported the couple to the nearest hospital. James had a skull fracture and Kimberly had a concussion, but both recovered. The police found the hammer used in the attack. They concluded that the assailant had entered through the garage, whose door was open. Fresh footprints in the snow led away from the house but eventually mixed with other tracks, and the trail was lost. They also found Kimberly's purse in the snow, missing only the money. Less than a week later, another violent incident shocked the Colorado community. Patricia Smith, a 50-year-old woman, had recently moved to Colorado from Nebraska to help her newly divorced daughter settle into a new home with her 2 young children. Patricia was a well-known interior decorator with a prestigious client list, known for her kindness, elegance, and activity. On Tuesday, January 10th, Patricia started her day by taking her daughter to a park to catch the bus to work, and then dropped off her grandchildren at daycare. She spent the rest of the morning working, picked up laundry at noon, and bought a hamburger for lunch. Arriving home, she went to her room, turned on the TV, and then apparently returned downstairs. Near the front door, she encountered an intruder in the living room. She had no time to react before a flurry of blows ended her life. That evening, around 5:30, her daughter was waiting at the park for her mother to pick her up. When Patricia did not arrive as usual, she called home from a public phone, but no one answered. Concerned, she called a cousin who picked her up along with the children and took them home. Upon arrival, they noticed the garage door open, and inside the darkened house, a flickering light from the TV upstairs. She found her mother's body on the floor, covered with a child's blanket with obvious signs of bleeding. Patricia's pants and boots were scattered around and her upper clothing was open, indicating another brutal assault. Beside her lay a hammer. Unable to believe what she was seeing, the terrified daughter ran to a neighbor's house, asking for help to confirm if her mother was still alive. Unfortunately, she was not. They immediately called 911. After Patricia's body was taken to the morgue for examination, the autopsy revealed 17 head injuries and confirmed sexual assault. Investigators deduced that after killing Patricia, the attacker went upstairs, stole money from her purse, and then fled. The investigation extended to Patricia's close acquaintances, including clients with whom she had had disagreements, but no leads emerged. That same day, January 10th, another young woman was attacked. Her name was Donna. She was a flight attendant for Frontier Airlines and her partner, Ron, was a pilot. That evening, Donna was off duty and awaiting Ron's return from a night flight. After shopping for groceries, she collected the mail and parked her car in the garage. As she exited her vehicle, she was struck on the temple and lost consciousness. The following morning, Ron returned home to find a red trail from the garage to the house. He rushed inside and followed the trail to the bedroom, where he found Donna lying on the bed with a head wound. Somehow, Donna had managed to make it to the bedroom. Ron called 911 immediately. Paramedics arrived and rushed Donna to the hospital, where she received treatment. Doctors confirmed she had been sexually assaulted. Initially, Ron was considered a suspect, but he had just landed in Colorado, and Donna's attack had occurred hours earlier. Investigators found a hammer covered in blood in the driver's seat of Donna's car. They collected it as evidence but found no useful fingerprints. Despite her severe injuries, Donna recovered, though the head injury left her with significant short-term memory loss, unable to recall the night of the attack. This lack of memory was, in some ways, a blessing to Donna, who was grateful to have survived. 6 days later, less than 25 miles from Donna and Ron's home, the horrific attack on the Bennett family occurred. Throughout that tragic January, while the families of the deceased mourned their losses, those who survived, like little Vanessa, continued their recovery. The Bennett family, especially Vanessa's grandmother Connie, held out hope for the child's recovery. The investigation stretched on. Investigators collected all possible evidence from the 4 crime scenes, including genetic material, footprints, and other clues. However, in the 1980s, forensic technology was far less advanced than today, and DNA analysis was just beginning. The attacks occurred in both Aurora and Lakewood, leading local police to share information. Unfortunately, no useful fingerprints were found at the crime scenes or on the hammers used in the attacks. The FBI was brought in, and a profiler studied the case, concluding that the attacker was likely an opportunistic rather than a predator. He did not target specific victims but seemed to roam neighborhoods looking for easy access, such as open garage doors. Once inside, his attacks were swift, violent, and fatal, followed by sexual assault and theft of money only. The profiler estimated that the perpetrator was a young man around 20 years old, intelligent but not highly educated, possibly a high school graduate but not a college student. The repeated use of hammers and a rugged boot print found at one scene suggested he worked in construction. At the time, numerous homes were being built in the areas where the crimes occurred. Most worryingly, the profiler asserted that this man would continue attacking until he was caught. Using this profile, investigators visited construction sites, talking to contractors and seeking information about any unusual behavior among workers. However, contractor records were not thorough and no useful descriptions of the attacker were available since all assaults were sudden and occurred in darkness. While the investigation continued without new leads, the community was gripped by fear. Residents became vigilant about locking their garages and doors, with some buying guns or even wearing helmets to bed. Time passed without further attacks, and the police were forced to move on to new cases, leaving these brutal crimes unresolved. Survivors of the assaults were recovering and trying to move past the trauma of their harrowing experiences, while the families of the victims continued to grapple with the pain of their loss. Periodically, the original investigators of the attacks, along with those who replaced them, would contact specialized departments and laboratories, hoping that advances in DNA technology might finally identify the perpetrator. In 1990, Aurora police sent samples from a bedspread, a carpet, and other items collected from the Bennett crime scene to a forensic examiner in Richmond, California. Unfortunately, no significant progress was made at the time. During a new review of the evidence, investigators found a blonde pubic hair and sent it for specialized analysis. However, due to the primitive technology of the time, the test destroyed this single hair without yielding any results. It wasn't until 2001, 17 years after the attacks, that full identification of the DNA samples was achieved, ruling out family members as potential suspects. It took another 3 years to definitively link the family case with Patricia's case, as the same DNA was found in samples from both crime scenes. Yet, the DNA belonged to an unknown individual, and finding a match in existing databases was challenging. Genetic databases across the U.S. were still in their infancy, with each state and agency having its own rules. In 2018, in another attempt to solve the cases, detectives teamed up with a genealogist. She used the sequenced DNA and began searching public and private databases. Within a week, she informed the detectives that the DNA belonged to someone with the last name Ewing. This was a significant breakthrough. Police found 3 or 4 in Colorado with the last name Ewing, but they were all ruled out as suspects. Further searches in Aurora's databases revealed 40 individuals with the surname Ewing. Investigators began analyzing each one while handling other cases. Finally, in July 2018, they discovered a match with an inmate in Nevada. The man, Alex Ewing. He was born on August 14, 1960, in North Carolina. Little is known about his childhood, and he never spoke about it, but it is known that he dropped out of school after the 10th grade. He claimed he was expelled for frequently getting drunk. This was the beginning of a life of crime. Alex was detained for 2 months in a juvenile center in Sacramento, California, for theft. He was later sent to a foster home, where he stayed for 2 weeks before being released. He then embarked on a criminal career, being arrested multiple times in California, Arizona, and Florida for theft, burglary, and escape. According to a driver's license he obtained in 1983, Alex was living in Denver, Colorado. The attacks occurred in early 1984, leaving 4 injured and 4 dead over 12 days. The assault stopped when Alex left Colorado, moving to Kingman, Arizona a few days later. There, on January 27, 1984, he broke into a home and attacked Roy Williams with a granite rock, hitting him in the head and chest. Roy survived, requiring 100 stitches. He gave a partial description of his attacker. Later that day, a police officer spotted a man matching the description hiding in bushes near an interstate on-ramp. The officer approached, and Alex fled. After a chase, Alex was apprehended. On February 2, 1984, Alex was formally charged with attempted first-degree murder and first-degree robbery and held in jail in Utah. In early August 1984, Alex and several inmates were transported from jail for a court hearing. During a stop at a service station, he escaped. Wearing red shorts and an orange jumpsuit, he ran and disappeared. At 10 p.m., police received calls about a suspicious man in red shorts running through a neighborhood. An hour later, Nancy Berry called 911 in a panic, saying she and her husband had been attacked. Nancy and her husband Chris were found severely injured in their bed. Alex had broken in through their open garage door and attacked them with an axe handle. Fortunately, their children were unharmed. A massive manhunt ensued, but Alex remained elusive. 4 days later, he was spotted at a phone booth, apparently calling his brother for help. He tried to flee, but, weakened and dehydrated, was captured. Back in custody, Alex faced trial and was charged with attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, robbery, and escape. He was sentenced to 110 years in prison. Meanwhile, he had been at large for less than 8 months after the Colorado attacks. In July 2018, a team of Colorado police and prosecutors traveled to the Northern Nevada Correctional Center to interview Alex. Initially posing as non-law enforcement, they did not mention the Colorado crimes. However, with the breakthrough in DNA technology and genealogy research, they finally had the evidence needed to connect Alex Ewing to the heinous crimes that had haunted Colorado for over 3 decades. In this conversation, Alex recounted that his father was in the Air Force and discussed his abandonment of school, claiming he had suffered from spinal meningitis, which led to a near-death experience and a change in his behavior. He also mentioned that, before arriving in Nevada, he had spent an unspecified time in Colorado, working in construction in Aurora and Lakewood. He said he left because it was too cold. This information confirmed Alex's presence in Colorado. The next day, a detective returned to meet with him, showing 6 black-and-white photographs of the crimes in that state. Initially, Alex denied knowing any of the victims. However, when shown a color photo of Patricia alive, he still claimed not to know her. But upon seeing a color image of her body, he became visibly agitated, insisted there must be a mistake, and immediately requested a lawyer. Alex had not anticipated this turn of events. After 34 years in prison, he was preparing documents to request parole, which he could do after serving 40 years. Confident in his release, he even created a profile on a dating site. Following this meeting, Colorado detectives obtained a court order to collect an additional cheek swab from Alex. The DNA results confirmed a match with samples from the Bennett and Patricia crime scenes. With this confirmation, police began notifying the families and survivors of the 1984 attacks, informing them they had finally found the perpetrator. However, justice would still take time. The first step was to request Alex's extradition from Nevada to Colorado for trial. The first extradition hearing took place on October 2, 2018. Alex informed the judge he planned to fight the extradition, and over the next 16 months, his lawyer filed appeals at every possible level. Meanwhile, Colorado prosecutors were considering their options. Unfortunately, For cases without fatalities, prosecution was impossible due to a 3-year statute of limitations. However, Alex could be tried for the fatal attacks, which meant he would be prosecuted for the deaths of the 3 Bennett family members and Patricia under Colorado's 1984 laws. At the time of the crimes, the maximum penalty was life without parole, as the death penalty was not applicable. On February 21, 2020, the Nevada Supreme Court ordered Alex's transfer to Colorado to face charges. His lawyer made an emergency appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, but it was declined. On February 28, 2020, Alex was flown to Colorado, and 2 days later he appeared in court for his first hearing. The trial for the Bennett family case began on July 27, 2021. The prosecution's case centered on Alex's confirmed DNA presence in semen traces found near Melissa's body. They highlighted the similarities in modus operandi, comparing it to the fatal attack on Patricia. Both cases involved brutal hammer attacks, sexual assault, and the bodies being left partially naked with faces covered. The attacker had entered through open garages, and the women's purses were found ransacked nearby. The defense attempted to undermine the investigators' professionalism, claiming mishandling of DNA samples and noting the absence of fingerprints or touch DNA at the crime scenes. The prosecution countered that Alex could have worn gloves. The jury heard from police, firefighters, investigators, and specialists. The most impactful testimony came from Connie Bennett, Bruce's mother, who described finding the horrific crime scene at her son's home. The jury also saw photographs taken at the Bennett residence. After deliberating for only 3.5 hours, the jury sent a note to the judge, stating they were deadlocked. The prosecutor requested the judge instruct the jury to continue deliberations, while the defense sought a mistrial. The judge decided it was too soon for a mistrial and asked the jury to return the next day. After 6 more hours of discussion, the jury found Alex Ewing guilty of the charges, including 3 counts of murder, robbery, and other offenses. On August 2021, before sentencing, family members, including Connie and Vanessa, the only survivor, gave impact statements. When asked if he had anything to say, Alex simply replied, "No, thank you." The judge harshly criticized Alex, stating that in all his years in the justice system, he had never encountered such depravity. He ensured Alex would never be free again, sentencing him to 3 consecutive life sentences, preventing the possibility of parole after 20 years. In October 2021, the trial for Patricia Smith's case began, but was declared a mistrial after Alex's defense requested a competency hearing to evaluate his mental state. The competency evaluation concluded that Alex was indeed mentally fit to stand trial. After delays, the trial finally took place in early April 2022. Unlike the first trial, Alex spoke up, complaining about his extradition from Nevada, accusing the system of being rigged, and alleging that authorities had ignored his efforts to lead them to the real criminals. Despite his arguments, the result was another life sentence, adding to the 3 he already had. Unfortunately, nothing could change the past. During the trial, Vanessa, the only survivor of the Bennett family, was present. Many might wonder what became of her after the tragedy. Vanessa shared her story in interviews with several media outlets describing a difficult life. Vanessa recounted that the brutal attack left her with severe physical and mental scars. After waking from a coma weeks after the assault, she had to relearn how to walk and do everything again. She mentioned having permanent physical injuries, including partial paralysis on her left side, making it hard for her to grip or release objects. However, the mental scars were even more profound. After being discharged from the hospital, Vanessa spent 2 months in a center for abused children before moving in with her grandmother. Filled with rage, she struggled at school where children mocked her, exacerbating her anger. She became rebellious, and her grandmother eventually enrolled her in a boarding school. During her first summer back home, she attempted suicide. Fortunately, the family intervened in time, and after recovery, she was sent to a psychiatric ward and then to a group home until she turned 18. At 18, Vanessa became pregnant, and social services took her child, as she admitted she did not know how to be a mother. Later, she had 2 more daughters who were placed in the care of a cousin, and she was not allowed to see or know their whereabouts. Vanessa developed borderline personality disorder, PTSD, bipolar disorder, and ADHD. Her fragmented memories of her family and life before the attack, coupled with severe mental instability and a drug addiction that began at 19, took a toll on her psyche. Vanessa explained that she used drugs to escape the world and forget everything, but this path led her to jail multiple times for shoplifting, assault, domestic violence, burglary, and drug possession. She lived homeless for a long time, residing under a bridge with a partner. This was her situation when she learned that her attacker had been caught. Despite the hardships, Vanessa found a ray of hope. By the age of 30, she decided to stop being a victim and dedicated herself to staying clean. She lived in an apartment with her second husband and had a cat. Vanessa aspired to obtain a university degree to become a counselor and help those struggling with substance abuse. When asked if she felt relieved when Alex was finally identified and punished, Vanessa said no. She expressed that while catching the killer might make others feel better, it meant nothing to her. The damage had already been done. Her life was ruined. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. On the morning of August 25, 2016, a tense silence filled the Ryan family home. Brett Ryan, feeling desperate and trapped by his own lies, was ready for a day that would change everything. He hid in his mother's garage, holding a crossbow, his weapon of choice. Brett had set up a clever digital trick to make it look like he was spending an ordinary day at home. As he sat there in the stillness, his mind buzzed with the gravity of what he was about to do. Brett Ryan was born in 1981 in Canada, into a warm and supportive family. His parents, Susan and Bill, and his 3 brothers formed a tight-knit household. Christopher and Leland were the eldest siblings, born in 1974 and 1979 respectively. Brett was the 3rd child, followed by the youngest, Alexander, who was born in 1987. Bill was a calm man deeply concerned with mental health, teaching classes at a local community center to stay fit and healthy. He also worked as a budget director for the Toronto Star newspaper. Susan, Brett's mother, was a cheerful yet firm woman, dedicated to household chores and raising her children. She had a passion for gardening and was an avid baseball fan. At 16, Brett graduated from high school and immediately enrolled at the University of Toronto with numerous plans. However, academics were not his only concern, as he was already worrying about money. He decided to work painting houses during the summer to cover his basic needs, buy clothes, and enjoy various recreational activities. People who knew Brett described him as always smiling and very polite. He was also very helpful, volunteering and refereeing minor league games at the local community center. Handsome and generous, he made friends easily. Despite his many attributes and above-average intelligence, university proved too challenging, and he eventually dropped out. Initially, this did not seem to affect him much, but reality soon caught up with him. While his friends built successful careers in fields like finance, healthcare, and education, Brett worked as a house painter. What started as a summer job became a full-time occupation. Behind his broad smile and worn-out paintbrush, desperation was growing. As one of the younger children, Brett lived with his parents and often received help from Bill, Susan, and his older brothers. His main issue was attempting to maintain a lifestyle that did not match his earning potential. At that time, Christopher was working with the Toronto Transit Commission, and Leland, considered the artist of the family, was studying photography and playing the drums and guitar. Alexander, the youngest Ryan, was intelligent and excelled in his studies, even attending a school for gifted children. While his brothers' lives seemed to be on track, Brett's life was drowning in growing debt, and he soon felt overwhelmed. By 2007, at the age of 26, his financial situation was dire, with debts exceeding $60,000. The crisis was not just financial. It spread to other areas of his life, leading to personal problems. He needed to increase his income urgently and spent hours thinking about what to do, which took a toll on him. Despite this, he projected a different image. Neighbors and friends saw Brett as a standout athlete, the life of the party, and often remarked that he was an extrovert in a family of introverts. Despite his worsening situation and periodic bouts of depression, Brett always tried to project a positive and strong image. He wanted to be admired, not pitied. However, the life Brett was living was far from what he had envisioned for himself. His erratic and criminal past began to unfold as he devised various plans. With above-average intelligence, instead of using it to earn extra income honestly, he embarked on a criminal career. The winning idea he had was to rob a bank. On October 20, 2007, Brett walked into an ICBC bank disguised as a patient, with bandages covering his face, wearing a hoodie, and with his left arm in a sling. He limped and carried an envelope supposedly containing professional documents. When it was his turn, he handed the teller a note stating it was a robbery and that he was armed, demanding $2,000 or more. The teller gave him just over $1,000, but for Brett, it was a triumph. He spent the next 8 months robbing banks using the same method. Brett embraced the theatricality of his crimes, deciding to change his bandaged disguise after the second robbery. He bought a high-quality beard and earned the nickname the Bearded Bandit in the media. He also wore a hat similar to the one worn by the protagonist of the show Gilligan's Island, paired with glasses, a checkered shirt, and a dark jacket. After planning his next heist, he struck again, obtaining between $2,000 and $3,000 in each robbery. After one of Brett's robberies, the police tracked his vehicle using an external camera and traced him back to his home. Several weeks later, when Brett Ryan approached another bank ready to make a withdrawal, the police had already been monitoring him for 15 days. He entered the bank, quickly turned around, and exited. Waiting outside were officers ready to arrest him. Brett pled guilty and spent the next 7 months in police custody awaiting trial. He was charged with 29 counts of armed robbery committed while disguised. In total, he had stolen $28,000. In January 2009, Brett found himself in a small, windowless room in the Ontario Court of Justice. Several close friends had written letters of support to the court, detailing Brett's generosity and volunteer work, hoping to influence the judge's decision favorably. Although many charges were dropped, he was convicted of committing 8 robberies. The court sentenced him to 45 months in prison, minus the 7 months he had already served. The judge also imposed a lifetime ban on possessing any firearms, even though none were ever found or proven to be in his possession. Brett made his first request for parole as soon as possible, but the parole board denied it. The board believed he needed to address his depressive episodes to qualify for parole. Brett accepted the recommendations and began attending professional sessions to tackle his mental health issues. The board also noted Brett's efforts to reconnect with his estranged family, discussing his depression with them. It was hoped that acknowledging his problem to his family would help manage his episodes. However, one treating psychiatrist warned that Brett could develop a more severe form of depression due to its hereditary nature. At the next parole hearing, his mother, father, and one of his brothers attended. This was seen favorably by the board, along with the fact that Brett's treatment involved counseling rather than medication. The documents showed he received 7 counseling sessions with a psychologist during this time. The psychologist's report indicated that Brett did not need ongoing psychological therapy or supportive counseling, but had the option to return if necessary. The Canadian Parole Board members noted that Brett had complied with all conditions and maintained a low risk of reoffending, granting him full parole on November 24, 2010. Brett returned home to his family, ready to start anew. However, freedom brought challenges Brett was unprepared for. Outside prison, he found a harsher world than he had left. Unable to escape his debt, he declared bankruptcy. His criminal past was easily discovered by potential employers who Googled his name and found his history of disguises and bank robberies. Brett tried to resume his house painting business, but most potential clients refused to hire him due to his past. Approaching 30 years old, Brett struggled to escape his reality as an ex-convict with no higher education and few prospects. His mother, Susan, was upset by neighbors' comments about their family. She and Bill sold their house and bought a small bungalow in Scarborough. The family decided to move to start a new life away from their former neighbors' remarks, eager to leave behind the years of Brett's imprisonment. The Ryans made the most of their new home. Susan transformed the front yard into an elaborate garden, filled with flowering plants, small shrubs, and a cat statue. Brett began taking steps to achieve the success he had always envisioned. He worked in low-paying retail jobs, but with some financial help from his parents, re-enrolled at the University of Toronto to pursue a degree in biophysics. He also made a concerted effort to be more open with his family. He visited a psychologist who emphasized that the lesson from his criminal past was to be honest with those closest to him. As the Ryans settled into their new community, they effectively started fresh. Each family member gradually resumed their activities. It seemed the storm had passed. Things were steadily improving each day. In September 2011, a friend set Brett Ryan up on a blind date with Kristen Baxter, a blonde and athletic physiotherapist. They met near her beachfront condominium. Kristen lived the happy life Brett desired for himself. She had a good job, a lovely home, and enjoyed hiking, traveling, and walking her dog. She was a pleasant young woman who looked like a magazine model, with a reserved smile that contrasted with her loud laughter when amused. Despite knowing Brett's criminal past, Kristen fell in love with him. By January 2013, they moved in together at her condo. Living with Kristen marked a significant change from his family's suburban bungalow. The condo was small but offered a stunning view of the lake beyond Toronto's islands. Brett could barbecue on the roof, watch planes land at the airport, and swim in the pool on the second floor, which had both covered and open areas. They frequently traveled to tropical places and enjoyed a dreamlike life together. However, fate had another twist in store for Brett. In 2014, his father Bill passed away, dealing a heavy blow. Brett's depression resurfaced along with financial problems. Brett confided in his therapist, trying to follow their advice. Following Bill's death, Brett paid more attention to his mother, helping her with administrative tasks Bill had once handled and doing odd jobs around the house for extra money. He needed the money, especially after proposing to Kristen with a diamond ring. Once again, his finances were crumbling, and as his bank account dwindled, he began spinning a web of lies. As months and years passed, Brett continued working, studying, and maintaining his family and romantic relationships as best as he could. But in reality, he was struggling with his past problems and hiding everything from everyone. In 2015, he dropped out of university again, but kept it a closely guarded secret. Kristen and her family believed he was still studying. He didn't even tell his therapist. By spring 2016, he received a job offer from a tech company in Toronto. This thrilled him, and he was convinced things would get better. He immediately told Kristen and his family, but within days, his past came back to haunt him. The company withdrew the offer after discovering his criminal record. Despite this, Brett convinced Kristen, his mother, and his brothers that he was still studying and had started the new job. As part of the deception, he dressed up and left home every day, leading everyone to believe he was managing his work and studies perfectly. He kept up appearances by smiling and doing everything possible to maintain his facade of happiness. On social media, he posted about various events, radiating joy, surrounded by friends, family, and his devoted girlfriend Kristen. He portrayed himself as an extroverted, popular, and friendly person, but internally, he was under immense pressure, a ticking time bomb. In his desperate attempt to keep up appearances and show that everything was going well, Brett and Kristen agreed to get married on September 16, 2016. The date held special significance as it marked their first date in 2011. The wedding was to be held at a luxurious venue in Ontario, costing $100 per person. At this point, it seemed Brett had finally taken control of his life. His mother, Susan, was so proud that she often bragged about his achievements to neighbors. She spoke of his university degree, good job, beautiful downtown apartment, and upcoming wedding. Paradoxically, Brett depended more on his mother than ever. With so many financial demands on the horizon, he pressured her to take on more paying jobs at home. But even with Susan's help, Brett's situation was becoming dire. Less than a month before the wedding, after over a year of piling lie upon lie, Brett finally followed his psychologist's advice and confessed everything to his mother. Susan's world shattered as she listened to her son admit that he needed to secure a good job but required her full support as a mother until then. To Brett's surprise, instead of rescuing him, she issued an ultimatum. Susan told him he had to tell Kristen the truth and announced that she wouldn't give him any more money until he did. Cornered with no way out, Brett devised a sinister plan. Outwardly, he continued to appear as the most extroverted and friendly person in the group, but each day he felt worse. He tried to manage the fragile web of lies, knowing it was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. Brett sought the right moment to talk and relieve himself of the burden, but days passed, and he didn't take the necessary step to come clean. Meanwhile, Susan constantly reminded him of the importance of honesty, especially with Kristen. She pressured him, saying that if he didn't speak up, she would. She revealed that she had discussed the situation with his 3 brothers, and they agreed with her. Unknowingly, Susan pushed Brett to the breaking point. She thought Brett would make the right decision, but never imagined how wrong she was. While she saw a look of remorse on her son's face, Brett was contemplating the most terrible plans to cover his lies. Determined to keep Kristen in the dark, he would go to any lengths, fearing she wouldn't forgive him and would end the relationship. Brett felt he couldn't bear another failure and began plotting how to silence his family. Brett Ryan thought that if he could scare his family with threats, he might prevent them from talking. But as he perceived their determination to tell Kristen the truth, he concluded that silencing them permanently was the only solution. In his mind, he began devising a macabre plan involving a crossbow, a silent weapon. Acquiring one was relatively easy and wouldn't pose any significant problem, as it didn't require a permit. The court restriction against him wouldn't be an obstacle either. He just needed to be over 18 years old. In Canada, crossbows are commonly used for hunting activities, so Brett bought a second-hand one, leaving no transaction record. During one of his visits to his mother's house, he hid the crossbow among some debris in the garage, where a kitchen renovation was underway. On the morning of August 25, 2016, Brett was determined to end his anguish. He set up an elaborate mechanism to create the perfect digital alibi. He gathered his laptop, 2 4-pound weights, a wooden spoon, a digital timer, and an oscillating fan. He propped his laptop against the wall with the weights, taped the spoon to the fan, and positioned it so that the tip aligned with the enter key on the keyboard. He connected the fan to the timer, programming it to turn on in the morning. Each time the fan moved, the spoon would press the enter key, making it appear as if Brett was watching YouTube videos. He prepared a similar setup with his tablet, phone, styluses, 2 oscillating fans, and 2 timers. He taped a stylus to each fan and secured the tablet and phone to wooden boards with screws. When the fans turned on, the styluses would send pre-written messages, making it seem like Brett was home all day, watching videos and sending emails. The next step was to leave his house without being caught on any security cameras. He exited the condo by taking the stairs to a back alley, avoiding the cameras, and headed to the public transit terminal. He took a train, got off at Eglinton Station, and walked to his mother's house. He arrived at 10 a.m., wearing 2 pairs of jeans, one over the other. He carried a bag with extra clothes, a wig, a fisherman's hat, and several crossbow bolts. Susan was surprised to see him. She wanted to rest as she was battling a cold but engaged in conversation with her son despite her fatigue. Brett tried to persuade his mother to keep quiet, but she was determined to talk to Kristen. In minutes, they were arguing heatedly. Brett rushed to the garage with Susan following, insisting he tell the truth. She called Christopher, Brett's older brother, and warned Brett that he was on his way. That was the final straw. Brett attacked his mother, shooting her in the cheek and ear with a crossbow bolt. He then strangled her with a yellow nylon cord. Susan was 66 years old. After killing his mother, Brett hid her body under some debris, covering it with a tarp. He then loaded the crossbow and waited for his brother Christopher. When Christopher arrived, Brett silently approached from behind and shot him in the neck, killing him instantly. He dragged his brother's body to the garage, placed it on top of their mother's, and covered them with the tarp. Christopher was 42 years old. Shortly after, his younger brother Alexander, 29, arrived. Brett struck him in the neck with a bolt, leaving him severely injured. Leland, 37, was napping in his room but rushed downstairs upon hearing a scream. Adrenaline and rage fueled Brett as he was determined to see his plan through. Leland thought Alexander had had an accident and didn't understand why Brett told him not to call for help. In seconds, a brutal fight ensued between the brothers. Brett, intent on killing Leland, and Leland fighting for his life. Meanwhile, Alexander managed to drag himself to the front door. The intense fight took them through various parts of what was once a warm family home. They fought in the living room, dining room, and 2 bedrooms until Leland finally escaped, screaming for help, and ran to the neighbor's house. As soon as they opened the door, Leland stumbled in, asking him to call emergency services and ensure the police arrived quickly before passing out. Meanwhile, Brett took a bottle of water from the fridge, not bothering to close the door. He sent an email to Kristen, saying he had ruined everything and everyone, apologizing for not controlling his mental and antisocial issues. He then walked like a sleepwalker and calmly sat at the entrance of the house, covered in blood from head to toe, realizing he had destroyed his world. Within minutes, police and homicide investigators arrived. Brett was sitting near Alexander, who was still breathing. Brett told the officers he should have taken Alexander to the hospital and added that there were 2 more bodies in the garage. He confessed to the murders, stating he used a crossbow. At that moment, the scene was swarming with police. Shortly after Brett's arrest, Toronto police entered Kristen's apartment and discovered the devices he had set up for his alibi. Initially unsure of what to make of them, they evacuated the building and called in the specialized threat response team. The specialists disconnected the fans and removed the pencils before the timers activated. They determined it was a ruse to make it appear that someone, in this case Brett, was using the devices from that location. The police stated that preliminary investigations revealed 3 deceased individuals, 1 female and 2 males, and an injured man who had been taken to the hospital. He also confirmed that they had the perpetrator in custody. The crossbow allegedly used in the attacks was recovered at the scene. He added that they would continue investigating to determine the motive and gather all evidence left at the crime scene to get a clear and objective view of what transpired. The community was shaken, saddened by the events, but also terrified. Most neighbors had lived in the area for 10, 20, or more years. In the days following the incident, everyone began locking their doors, and they came and went with caution and fear. While the neighbors grappled with a newfound sense of insecurity, Brett had to give statements to the police. He admitted to killing his mother and 2 of his brothers but claimed his initial intent was only to scare them. He said that when he went to the garage for the crossbow, it was to intimidate his mother, but he lost control. When brought before the court, he waived his right to a preliminary hearing and pleaded guilty. He hired a renowned criminal defense attorney known for representing high-profile clients, particularly in criminal cases. Brett faced charges of 3 counts of first-degree murder with various aggravating factors. However, he argued that the charge for his mother's death should be second-degree murder, as he didn't intend to kill her. Regarding his brother Christopher, Brett admitted to first-degree murder since he waited in hiding and ambushed him with the crossbow. For his brother Alexander, who arrived unexpectedly, he accepted a second-degree murder charge. In the case of Leland, he admitted to attempted murder and acknowledged inflicting multiple injuries. The trial was relatively brief. In the next hearing, Brett appeared before the jury and, through sobs, expressed deep regret for his actions, apologizing to his friends, Kristen, and especially his surviving brother, Leland. He vowed to use the time and opportunities presented to him, repeatedly saying how sorry he was. Brett insisted he hadn't intended to use the alibi devices, claiming he decided to talk to his mother instead. However, the expert report contradicted him, stating that the devices would have functioned to make it appear someone was at home watching YouTube and sending emails if they hadn't been disabled. The judge acknowledged Brett's immediate guilty plea and noted his apparent remorse and willingness to be accountable for his actions. The judge also remarked that Brett was, in a way, a victim trapped in a web of lies. Ultimately, Brett was sentenced to 3 concurrent life sentences for each murder, plus an additional 10 years for the assault on Leland. He would be eligible for parole in 2041 at the age of 60. Leland Ryan chose not to speak to the media, but shared his anguish in court. He described the horror of fighting for his life against his own brother and then seeing his mother and brothers dead. He admitted struggling to sleep and living in constant sorrow and distress. Brett had believed in the fantasies he created in his mind, but when everything fell apart, instead of facing reality, he lost himself in a labyrinth of lies with the worst possible outcome. At 35 years old, Brett had been weeks away from marrying the woman of his dreams, living in a beachfront condo. Perhaps, if he had told the truth, Kristen might have understood. But now, that possibility is lost forever, as Brett destroyed every bridge with his terrible actions. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. As the sun began to set on June 7, 2011, the living room of the 25-floor apartment in the University Club Tower in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was filled with long shadows. After a heated argument, Joshua was pushed towards a window. He tried to catch himself, but the glass shattered, and he fell through. People below watched in shock as Joshua's body plummeted from the high floor, landing with a terrible thud on the 8th-floor parking garage. Joshua Hilberling was born on May 30, 1988, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was the son of Gene and Patrick Hilberling and had 5 siblings: Zach, Scott, David, Carrie, and Nikki Ross. Growing up in a large family, Joshua's childhood was lively and joyful, filled with games invented by his siblings. He was especially close to Zach, who was just 13 months younger, and they shared a strong bond, with Zach often emulating Joshua. Patrick, a veteran of the Air Force, instilled values of integrity and commitment in his children. Joshua attended Victoria Christian High School, where he excelled in sports, particularly football. He was also known for his friendly and charming personality, enjoying video games and family time. In 2007, after completing his studies, Joshua followed in his father's footsteps and joined the United States Air Force. In early 2010, he met Amber, whom he believed to be the love of his life. Amber reciprocated his feelings, and their relationship blossomed quickly. Amber was born on October 1, 1991, in Joplin, Missouri. Her family moved to Tulsa 3 months after her birth, where they later welcomed 2 more children, Adam and Ariel. Amber, with her beautiful long blonde hair, attended Skelly Elementary School. She was not only beautiful but also intelligent and dedicated, consistently ranking among the top students. During her school years, she participated in various outdoor activities, excelling in soccer, volleyball, track, and dance. She was also a member of an American nonprofit organization that promotes and supports agricultural education. After her parents' divorce, Amber's mother remarried a well-known local surgeon. He embraced Amber as his own daughter. Amber was a devout churchgoer and a voracious reader and movie enthusiast, often quoting films to the fascination of those around her. She also had a keen interest in history and wrote many eloquent poems. Amber had a passion for fashion, makeup, and shoes. When Joshua and Amber met, she was 18 and living with her mother and stepfather. Their relationship progressed quickly, and when Joshua, then 22, learned he would be stationed in Alaska in 6 months, they decided to marry so she could accompany him. They wed in the summer of 2010 in a beautiful ceremony with one of Joshua's brothers serving as the best man. Shortly after, the newlyweds moved to Fairbanks, Alaska. Despite their excitement, they soon faced unforeseen challenges. Their youth, inexperience, and the isolation of their new home led to frequent arguments, as Amber herself later recounted. Her husband also developed the habit of breaking her cell phone so that she couldn't communicate when he wasn't home. Although there are versions that suggest she had a fiery temperament, as often happens in relationships, especially in extreme cases, the truth likely lies somewhere in the middle. Despite their tumultuous relationship, they remained in love and soon discovered they were expecting their first child. However, on January 2, 2011, base officials received a report from Amber alleging that her husband had assaulted her. She told the officers that they began arguing after she wanted to order takeout, which he refused, leading to insults. While Amber was preparing dinner, Joshua approached her, throwing a drink and a plate from her hand. He then grabbed her right breast, causing bruising and broken blood vessels. These details were recorded in the military report, and photographs of the injuries were taken to document the case, leading to Joshua's arrest. The incident occurred in the first trimester of Amber's pregnancy, and she ultimately decided not to press charges. 5 months later, things worsened when Joshua was unexpectedly and disgracefully discharged from the Air Force due to misconduct involving drug use, as shown in records. As a result, Joshua and his beautiful wife packed their bags once more and returned to Tulsa. Despite their rocky relationship, Amber and Joshua were excited about their baby's impending arrival, a joy shared by their families. The couple temporarily moved into Amber's mother's home while making permanent housing arrangements and preparing for the birth. However, this arrangement was short-lived. Joshua's issues extended to his in-laws, who accused him of substance abuse and demanded that he leave. Although Amber was welcome to stay, she chose to go with him. Concerned for her daughter's and grandchild's well-being, Rhonda, Amber's mother, generously allowed them to stay in one of her properties, an apartment on the 25th floor of University Club Tower, a unique 32-story cylindrical building. Amber's maternal grandmother also lived in one of the units. The building, constructed in 1966, was the first major U.S. structure designed using computerization for structural calculations, ensuring it was strong enough to withstand wind sway. When the young couple moved in, the facade and glass curtain wall panels were 46 years old, and the building did not meet modern construction standards. Moving there did not bring peace or relief to their marriage. The arguments continued, exacerbated by Joshua's frequent nighttime outings. He would leave Amber alone in the apartment and take the car her mother had lent them, meant for Amber's use in case of emergencies with her advanced pregnancy. Records show numerous text messages from Amber to Joshua, pleading for him to return home and fulfill his family responsibilities, but he repeatedly refused. By this time, their families and friends had taken sides, each blaming the other. Amidst accusations and gossip, there were frequent suggestions that they should separate for their own good. In early June 2011, with Amber 7 months pregnant, the couple seriously considered divorce, making their home environment even more unbearable. The situation escalated to the point where one of them threw a TV out the bedroom window, shattering it. When they informed the building manager about the broken window, they were told they had to pay for the damage. On Tuesday, June 7, 2011, with the divorce papers on a table in their apartment, Joshua decided to skip Amber's biological father's wedding that weekend. Instead, Joshua chose to go with his friends to a music festival in Tennessee. According to Amber, he planned to use and sell drugs at the event. Upset about his imminent absence at such an important family event and his dubious intentions, Amber reacted badly. After a heated exchange, she continued packing laundry to take to her grandmother's house since their apartment lacked a washer and dryer. In a fit of rage, she began pulling her husband's dirty clothes out of the basket. At that moment, the professional hired to repair the broken window knocked on the door. Upon entering, he immediately sensed the tension in the air. When he quoted a repair cost of $150, the couple started arguing again. Joshua considered fixing it himself, but ultimately agreed it was best for the professional to handle it. With his belongings packed, Joshua asked his father to pick him up, but his father said it wasn't possible. Consequently, Joshua turned to his friends for help. One of them, Brandon, agreed to come but didn't realize the urgency of the request. Soon after, the situation between Joshua and Amber escalated into even more violence. Exactly what happened next is a mystery both took to their graves. On the afternoon of Tuesday, June 7, 2011, while they were arguing in the living room, 23-year-old Joshua inexplicably fell against the window, which shattered on impact. Amber watched in horror as her husband plummeted from the 25th floor. The professional working on the other broken window in the bedroom heard the crash and rushed to the living room. Initially, given the heated argument he had overheard, he thought Joshua had jumped intentionally. According to his later testimony, Amber was completely distraught, crying and frantically saying Joshua had fallen and needed help. She then ran out the apartment door. Across the street, Robert, a resident, was smoking a cigarette when he saw Joshua fall and land face down on the 8th-floor parking garage, his head against the railing. It took nearly 3 seconds for Joshua to hit the ground, resulting in an instant death. Robert ran towards the apartment complex while the manager tried to contact Armando, the professional fixing the window. Meanwhile, Amber frantically pressed the elevator buttons to get to the first floor, searching desperately for Joshua. When she couldn't find him, she looked toward the 8th-floor parking garage and realized what had happened. She ran to the elevator again, this time accompanied by the building manager, who urged her to remain calm to avoid causing a bigger scene. Upon reaching Joshua's lifeless body, Amber understood the gravity of the situation. Paramedics, firefighters, and authorities arrived, alerted by several neighbors. Amid tears and screams, Amber repeatedly begged them to save him, but it was clear there was nothing they could do. Amber kept saying she hadn't meant for this to happen. Although one of the firefighters heard her mention, it was never her intention for things to escalate so severely. The police escorted Amber to the Tulsa police station as a formality, to ask standard questions and try to piece together the events of that day. Amber requested to wait for her grandmother before going. At that point, the authorities were uncertain about what exactly had happened in the couple's apartment. Unbeknownst to Amber, her life was about to change dramatically, not only because she was now a widow, but in many other aspects. Once at the station, the police placed Amber and her grandmother in a room where they were alone. They were asked to remain calm as someone would be with them shortly. What they didn't realize was that the room was equipped with recording devices. Every word they spoke during that time was captured. Additionally, an on-duty officer observed all their actions in real time. Amid her utter shock, Amber tearfully told her grandmother that while they were arguing in the living room, she went to the bedroom and upon returning she pushed Joshua towards the wall in response to his insults. He stumbled, tried to catch himself, but ultimately fell through the window. At one point, she told her grandmother that Joshua's parents were right when they repeatedly claimed that if they stayed together, she would eventually cause his death. Amber couldn't stop lamenting the fatal outcome she had caused. Her grandmother was aware that Amber's in-laws would relentlessly pursue her, so she urged her to stay strong, especially for her unborn child. Despite following her grandmother's advice to remain silent without legal representation, the police still arrested Amber as a suspect. The next day, after securing a lawyer, her mother paid the bail, and Amber was released. As the investigation continued, Joshua's memorial service was held on the morning of Saturday, June 11, 2011. Instead of flowers, the family requested memorial contributions in Joshua's name. From that point on, each family accused the other spouse of violence. Amber's claim of self-defense against an abusive husband was quickly overshadowed by the aggressive public campaign launched by Joshua's relatives and friends. The media sided with the Hilberlings, portraying Amber as a mentally unstable criminal and Joshua as a gentle man driven to madness by her. Websites appeared where anonymous people called for Amber's execution, and strangers harassed her family. On August 6, 2011, while awaiting a complex and controversial trial, Amber gave birth to her son. Close friends described him as a beautiful blend of his parents. Amber and her lawyers rejected 2 plea deals offered by the district attorney's office. One deal was a 5-year prison sentence plus 15 years of probation, and the other was 7 years in prison with 13 years suspended. Amber later told a major American media outlet that she did not regret her decision, as she was confident in her innocence and willing to take any risk to prove it. These decisions led to her being tried for second-degree murder. When Amber began attending court hearings in fitted jackets, impeccably made up and sporting disheveled blonde hair, the public and press used these details to confirm their preconceived notions about her. Meanwhile, she cherished every moment with her young son, finding peace in watching him grow amidst the chaos surrounding her case, which seemed focused on her family's financial means to evade justice. On the opposite side of her, many detractors was a page created by those who believed in her innocence. Although fewer, these supporters extensively discussed on social media the records of domestic violence perpetrated by Joshua. They also posted text messages from Amber's phone, supposedly from conversations with her husband the day before his death. On September 19, 2012, Amber filed a lawsuit against University Club Tower, claiming that Joshua's death resulted from the condominium's negligence. The document alleged that Joshua's fatal fall occurred because the window did not meet the glass requirements stipulated by Tulsa's building code. 6 months later, Amber's trial commenced. During her testimony, Amber told the jury that when she entered the living room, Joshua stepped away from the window and walked toward her. It was then, according to her, that he grabbed her shoulders with both hands. Fearing the worst, she pushed him hard against the wall between the chandeliers and the TV. To better explain, Amber drew a diagram of the push, and the court allowed her to stand in the witness box to demonstrate. The deputy district attorney began her cross-examination, making it clear to the jury that they did not need to believe Amber intended to kill her husband to convict her of the charge. They only needed to be certain that her act was extremely dangerous to another person. She added that the incident evidenced a depraved mindset. In this context, the video of Amber's conversation with her grandmother at the police station, where she admitted her guilt, was a key piece of evidence presented by the prosecution, despite the defense's efforts to suppress it. Additionally, the prosecutors called witnesses who claimed to have heard sounds of a struggle in the apartment, including heavy footsteps moving towards the window area. Their hypothesis suggested that Amber, despite her advanced pregnancy, had attacked her nearly 6-foot, 220-pound husband in a fit of rage, pushing him through the glass. Armando testified about what he heard and saw that day, as did the firefighter at the scene, who mentioned that Amber repeatedly said she didn't mean to push her husband out the window. An expert in windows and glass was called as a defense witness. He explained that the window in question was made of annealed glass, which lacked the strength required for residential use. He asserted that if the window had been made of safety glass, Joshua might not have fallen through it, as tempered glass is 4 times more resistant to wind loads and twice as resistant to impacts as regular annealed glass. In his expert opinion, the domestic dispute put the victim in contact with weak, unsafe, and poorly supported glass, compounded by other factors like the building's poor condition and wind pressures pushing the glass and Joshua outward. Despite the defense's considerable efforts, the jury took only 3 hours to find Amber guilty of second-degree murder. On March 18, 2013, the judge sentenced Amber to 25 years in prison for the crime against her husband. Additionally, she was fined $10,000 and ordered to reimburse over $6,000 in funeral expenses paid by Joshua's family. According to Oklahoma law, after 1 year, the judge could suspend part or all of the sentence, potentially granting Amber less time behind bars. Otherwise, she had to serve at least 85% of her sentence, or 21 years, before being eligible for parole. Amber's son, then 6 years old, was legally placed under the care of his grandmother Rhonda and her husband. They regularly visited Amber in prison. A couple of months after the sentencing, a well-known American presenter traveled to the correctional center to interview Amber. The program aired in 2016. During the televised interview, Amber admitted to yelling at her husband, calling him a coward during the argument that led to his fatal fall, but she continued to insist on her innocence. The special, which included interviews with family members, police personnel, and various experts, reignited public interest in the case and the controversial verdict. The passage of time did little to lessen the controversy surrounding the story. The flame was further fanned when the state Supreme Court questioned the tactics used to prosecute Amber. Rhonda blamed the Hillburling's high profile in Tulsa for creating and fostering certain prejudices against her daughter. Later, rumors of Amber's alleged misconduct while in custody brought her back into sensationalist headlines. The lawsuit against University Club Tower was dismissed in March 2015. Amber died in prison on October 24, 2016, at the age of 26. The coroner's report noted scars on her wrists and forearms and methamphetamine in her blood. According to the coroner, Amber had taken her own life. Later, her parents appeared on television, claiming they believed their daughter had been killed by someone else. The Oklahoma Department of Corrections was sued for failing to take reasonable measures to prevent or address the conditions that led Amber to such a drastic decision while in custody. The lawsuit, filed by her heirs in Oklahoma County District Court, sought $75,000 in compensation. A spokesperson for the prison system stated that the agency does not comment on pending litigation. The outcome of that lawsuit, if any, has not been disclosed. Rhonda, Amber's mother, later remarked that despite the tragic end that no one in the family desired, her daughter had finally found peace. She also announced that she would ensure her grandson had a fulfilling life. This case highlights the severe issue of domestic violence in the United States. The Hillburlings had reported each other to the authorities multiple times, showing injuries that confirmed their claims. However, they failed to end their toxic relationship, leading to a doubly tragic conclusion. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.